Recording. So I see your screen, Wyatt. So awesome. All right,
Okay.
go for it.
The lesson I chose was actually pretty or relatively similar to the one that Jasmine chose. This is lesson 5. And in lesson 5, students are looking at the different approaches taken in the abolition movement, specifically looking at the differences of white abolitionists versus black abolitionists, right? Those students will learn that black abolitionists were much more likely to use, I called it, any means necessary to combat slavery, talking about Nat Turner's insurrection and rebellion, while white abolitionists were more likely to kind of appeal to other whites. Also talking about how black abolitionists were much more likely to use like political like avenues to address abolition. And so why it matters, students are kind of grappling with this question of what does it mean to radically transform a society, and understanding that these difference in approaches and motivations, it develops, one, a sense of history for all students, but also positions like students in a contested question. And I think it's also super analogous to like contemporary questions about race, specifically thinking about, you know, people who have a hard time understanding protest. Like why do we have to protest, right? Why can't we, you know, vote our way to, you know, society, right? And so this is like very similar debate. So it has a lot of contemporary analogies, right? And so then finally, how are students assessed in this curriculum? They're assessed using a document-based question that specifically asks them to compare the difference in approaches of those two racial groups and how they approached abolition.
I was just talking and I was muted. Okay, I'm back. So thank you so much for sharing, Wyatt. Two things that I was pulling out was, you know, we've now seen 2 of the different instructional activities core members will be using. The second one being the DBQ. I think this is potentially a hot spot. Some of our stronger CMs are able to get students to like do a longer length response. Some of our more struggling core members have issues with that. So I think us pushing that to make sure, once again, just like the exit ticket, we get solid DBQ responses. The other thing I wanted to name was, or a potential hotspot was, this is, I think, a lesson where we can make some really strong connections to our current context, but we have to watch and make sure we help core members understand that, like, we cannot let those current considerations derail the lesson as students start to only talk about what's going on in society and protests in general, and then lose sight of the underlying conversation. And the reason I say that as a hotspot is we will have some core members who are well versed in these issues and then feel very comfortable because it's what they know to sort of like get on the soapbox, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, the other thing too is there is some similarities, right, between those 2 lessons, even though they're on different days in different different types of history. The big picture is the same, and I think that's something that we can sell to our core members. Like, hey, your friend, your colleague might be in world history and you are in U.S., but y'all still need to collaborate, right? Some of the underlying themes are the same, and there's a woven thread throughout all the curriculum. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Okay, so now let's kind of talk briefly about what that means in terms of culturally responsive teaching as well as our vision. So when we think about academic achievement, cultural competence, and then socio-political consciousness, where did y'all see elements of these three, and where did you not see elements of these three in the two different lessons that y'all shared?
I think that, with a DBQ, you're definitely addressing academic achievement. The DBQ is like one of the most challenging things that students will engage with, like throughout their high school career in humanities. And so finding ways to hold students to the expectation that everyone is able to do an DBQ, everyone is going to leave, summer with a DBQ, definitely speaks to academic achievement. And I think it certainly develops a socio-political consciousness, but I think like teachers, especially core members, need to be really aware of like their students' culture and their own culture when they go in to address these questions, because it's their job to position students as like it's up to the teacher's job to position students in order to develop a social and political consciousness instead of just kind of bestowing upon them their social and political consciousness, because they might have like really good reflections and really good thoughts, but the goal is that the students can develop their own and kind of arrive at those conclusions independently.
Yeah, I want to jump on something that you said. Another potential hot spot for us, or rather, something that I noticed more last year than in years past, was more of our core members sort of being surprised, I think, sometimes at their students' beliefs about a lot of things, and like, how do we balance like our core members' idealism and like advanced knowledge, but also allow them to like let kids derive sort of their own thoughts, even when they might differ from our own. So hopefully y'all can figure that out, because it definitely was a challenge last year.
So actually what you just said lends itself to what I was going to say. I definitely agree with Wyeth that the academic achievement is obviously there. Even though for my assessment they were just doing exit, but there was still a part of the lesson where they were coming up with a question that they would later answer, and then also writing an argumentative paragraph. So that in and of itself is obviously pushing towards academic achievement. Um, and obviously just from the nature of like what was going on with the Haitian Revolution, I think it also lends itself to socio-political consciousness, just because students might be learning something that is historical that they've never heard before. And so based on that, and using those primary and secondary sources, students are kind of able to figure out where they fall as far as what the causes of the Haitian Revolution was. But Andre, what you just said, like with core members having to like balance their ideologies, but at the same time allowing students and pushing students to come up with their own, I think really shows access, because like anything you do in the classroom as a teacher, you probably, and especially with history, you probably have, personal beliefs that you hold dear. But sometimes we have to, and core members have to step back from that and tell students very explicitly, like, listen, I have my opinion, but here are just the facts. And I'm going to give you the facts and then allow you to frame and come up with your own opinion. And I think just by doing that, it helps students to build a rapport with that core member or teacher, because so often students are just getting, here's what this is, here's what you should think about it. And so giving them an opportunity to say, here are some facts, you form your own opinion, I think really lets students know that a core member or a teacher would care about them, which then later translates to a strong rapport.
You know what? Can we sell it to core members the exact way you phrased it? Like, can you get up at some point and sell it to them that way, like not only does this make kids better critical thinkers, but like they'll learn to trust you because they realize that like you value them as like an independent person.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're on the hook for that now. Okay. Awesome. All right. So that being said, let's go ahead and push forward. Okay. So how do we think that this curriculum allows us to reach our vision here? And I know on this slide it talks about like our vision for student experience and broader student outcomes, but I actually want to change this question up. I want you to think about your own vision for like what social studies core members and also students can do at the end of the summer. How does the snippet of curriculum you looked at match your vision for where you want students and core members to be at the end of the summer?
I can go. So for me, as far as the vision for students, I would want at the end of the summer for them to be well versed in using evidence to support whatever it is that they're responding to or answering. And so the lesson plan that I just went over, those primary and secondary sources is doing exactly that, where students have to use those sources to then go back at the end to complete their exit ticket to find the causes of the Haitian Revolution. And for core members, I think really a big thing, the vision for me for core members at the end of the summer as it pertains to history would be that they allow students to have their own opinion. And because hopefully we're not in the business of creating robots. And so your job as a teacher going into the fall shouldn't be for students to believe everything that you believe. Your job as a teacher should be to present them the facts and then equip them with everything that they need to make their own opinion and judgment about things. So I think that lesson plan was a good kickoff to do both of those things for both students and for core members.
I'm with you. I'm so with you. We might not let you go to ELA. I'm just telling you right now.
Yeah, don't leave me alone, please. For me, for like students, I think that the biggest thing that I want them to be able to take away with at the end of the summer is that they found a way to like one, share their opinion and like be comfortable and confident sharing their opinion because they were and then this goes to teacher actions, because they were in a learning environment that fostered like a sense of respect, a sense of discussion, and then also the ability to like respectfully disagree. I think is essential. Like students leaving, like now I know how to respectfully disagree with one of my peers. Now I feel comfortable and confident sharing my opinion. And then as far as teachers are concerned, I really want teachers to leave summer really focused on the idea of building skills and being able to break down something like a DBQ and figure out how do I build skills so I can meet students at all levels, because that is something that it took me like 4 years of teaching to really get to this point of where the content doesn't matter so much as the skills that I'm trying to build in my students. And if I can focus solely on those skills, the content will come like much easier. So I want teachers leaving thinking about like, how do I build these skills so that the content comes more naturally and the facts, right? The stuff that you can Google becomes much more accessible and much more easier to manage.
Okay, now you are on the hook for explaining skills the way you just did, because our core members might not teach world history or U.S. history or even high school for that matter. And a lot of them have questions about like, how does this curriculum tie in? But I think we just send them to you and have you give them that spiel. Like at the end of the day, it's not what you're teaching at Institute, but it's how you're teaching. So let us go ahead and move forward. Okay. So when we think about core member outcomes, I think our big push here is to have core members realize that they are still aspiring and developing culturally responsive teachers, right? But that it's a process. They're not going to be as CRP as they want to be. And that is okay as long as they recognize that being that educator is central. We also want them to know the elements of a lesson plan and then articulate how each lesson does need to have a goal as well as like a corresponding assessment that is backwards planned so that like at the end of the class period, but also at the end of the unit, students have a thorough understanding of what's going on. So I think those are sort of our big outcomes for the first couple of weeks, right? Like understand that you're a work in progress, but CRP is critical, and you know the basics of lesson planning with a focus on backwards planning. Do y'all have any questions about this or anything you want to add here?
Sorry, I just realized you may not be able to see me. No, I'm good.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I'm good too.
Perfect. We're going to actually push forward from that question. What are some potential additional hotspots that y'all are thinking about based on what we just kind of talked about?
I think one of the biggest hotspots. So when I went through like the social studies curriculum at Institute, it was world geography. It wasn't particularly rigorous, and I was just, for lesson plans, I was making my own lesson plans, and they weren't very good. And so one hotspot that I do see is that we now have like robust and rigorous lesson plans that are really going to require teachers to do a lot of modeling, a lot of skill building, and like a lot of like fostering of like discussion spaces and building of discussion spaces, which is excellent. It's also like difficult to do if your classroom management is on point, isn't on point. And so I think that we just need to be cognizant of like deficit talk amongst core members, because I mean, I hear it at my school today with teachers that I've taught forever, right? Oh, these kids can't write, like comments of that nature, because right, that's not meeting students where they're at, and that's not academic achievement. That's not pursuing academic growth. So I think with the rigor of these lesson plans, being cognizant of that type of talk is going to be.
No, I think you bring up a really critical point. Like these lesson plans are going to ask core members to like really be on top of their management and facilitation, but that also means that like we need to make sure we equip them with those skills and we cut out that like negatively framed language early. It's like straight up, yo, core members, these lesson plans are tough and you're going to need to be good to get them done. And our focus this summer is to make sure you're good enough to do this lesson well, because we cannot allow these lessons to fall flat. So for sure, absolutely.
I would agree with you, Wyeth. I think another potential hotspot I could see, just like we talked about, like I think it could be a very slippery slope with very recent college grads who feel inundated with all this work, but also maybe feel like they know everything because they just got their degree. And I'm sitting in front of a bunch of kids, so they should just listen to whatever I say, and that should be their truth. Instead of allowing students to form their own opinion. I think that could be a very dangerous slope.
To piggyback on that, sometimes, especially last year, that got into core members thinking that they knew better than us. And that was tricky, right? Because on the one hand, like, we are colleagues in this work and like we want our space to foster discussion. But then there's also times where it's like, ooh, can you not necessarily like question every sort of thing we put in front of you? And think that you know better. And I think that was a balance that was tough for us last year. I would say in history, maybe not as much, but in secondary ELA, that was legit a major problem. Like, core members knew better than CMAs and the TEF, and it's like I think we never wanted to pull rank, but there were times where it felt like we needed to. But then if we pull rank, does that then teach core members to do the same with kids? And I have no idea the correct answer on that one.
Interesting.
I think that working in a small group is definitely going to be beneficial for us. And I think based off of our few interactions, I think we have like a very like a group that values professionalism. And so I think core members are going to see that, and hopefully that's going to mitigate some of it, just like having a united front and being professionals is going to, mitigate some of that, and not all of it. I haven't done this before, so I don't know for sure. But that's what I would hope.
Yeah. And I'm a very honest person in my feedback.
You love it. Ready for it.
I am. I don't know any other way. And so I'm pretty sure my core members will learn that very early on about my personality. So I think it's just explaining to them listen, I've been doing this for almost 10 years. Like, it sounds good. But I kind of know what I'm talking about, and I have the data to back it up. On the other side of that, when you're saying like, does that lend them to like pull rank over their students? I just think that like that's an explicit discussion. It's like, well, what are you talking about pulling rank? Are you talking about pulling rank because you're an adult and they're not allowed to have their own opinions? Or are we talking about like classroom management and directions? Because if we're talking about classroom management, then yeah, you pull rank over children. But if we're talking about like they should believe this versus this, then it's like, what are you really doing? Are you creating little Miss Johnsons? Or are you creating like thoughtfully generated world-class citizens? Because that should be your goal at the end of the day, to create world-class citizens, not versions of you.
If and when we get to this point with a core member, you are now on the hook for having that conversation the exact way you just did.
Okay.
Any other potential hot spots that y'all foresee?
I also am new to this. So like Wyeth, I was, back in the day when we were writing our own lesson plans. So this new version is different. But, and I don't know if you all have run into it before, but I think with the lesson plans already been written for them, you could potentially run into like core members who are not reading the documents before they give it to the students. Does that make sense? So like my lesson plan had several primary and secondary sources, but if a core member, if they're reading that for the first time in front of the students, it's like they may not, have as much background knowledge. They might not have thought about what questions to ask or what parts to pull out of that document. They may not have looked at vocabulary that students might need to know before they dive into that document. So I could kind of see that. But I guess that might kind of just depend on the core member and how prepared they choose to be, I guess.
Yeah, that's definitely a hot spot. I think we've got to frame it to them like, look, actually getting a pre-made lesson plan in some cases might be harder. You might need to spend more time on your internalization process. And I think for us,
Yes.
making sure their work time in session, like we're explicit about that, and also, I mean, just over and over. So yeah, I think that's definitely a hot spot. It's come up before. Yeah. So I noticed Craig's on this call as well, and yeah, we're talking about curriculum, but we can also open it up. Craig, were there any hot spots that you heard from when you were creeping in other people's calls, or just from your own eons of time here at Institute?
Like hotspots just in general, or like specifically about like the scripted lesson plan stuff?
Scripted lesson plans.
Yeah. I think one of the things that, I mean, I would like, so Jasmine's point about like I wrote my lesson plans back in the day is like very like it resonates with me as well. Like I'm a 2001, and so we wrote our unit plans. So we went all the way back then. We were like, what are we teaching? It's like, whatever you want. Like,
Oh my goodness.
cool. Yeah, it was brutal. One thing that I have learned is that just like our students don't, like I always said this, like our students don't care what awards we've won or what we like, they could care less. And one of the things that I found is that like our core members don't care that we wrote our own lesson plans. They are in a different generation than the group of us that wrote our lesson plans. And so a polite way to say it is like there's a like a little bit of air like of entitlement that some of our core members bring. And so one thing I would caution us on is they don't like to hear the back in my day stories. It like, even though like they need, even though they, there we go. Even though they need to hear those stories, they do not, my experiences have landed well with core members. So I would say like, be ready to share those stories, but think about like, how do you share it so that they understand what they're being given in a way, but not in a way of like, look, if I can do it, so can you type of experience. That would be the only like hotspot I remember hearing people run into last year.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm going to peace out, but you all enjoy your world of social studies, which is not a world that I enjoy being a part of. No offense. I'm going to go back to the math world.
Get out of here.
Goodbye.
All right, y'all. Can y'all think of any other hot spots, or are we ready to move into seeing what the session looks like for core members?
I think one more thing about just like about scripted pre-made lesson plans is that one, CMs, they might not internalize them, but two, they might internalize them and think that there's only one way to do it, and that this is exactly how it should go, and that is just like here it is, here's a lesson plan, and not break it down in such a way that makes it accessible to like wherever their students are at. Because I mean, when I was at Institute in Houston, my students were a certain way, and then I went to the Rio Grande Valley. It was very different in terms of culture and skill level and language and all sorts of different things. And so being able to have a curriculum and then, be flexible with it, I think that's part of our responsibility as CMAs to build like just like core member judgment.
Copy that. I definitely agree. Okay. So these are just some things that we can be mindful of in the next couple of weeks. That being said, I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time, so I am going to go ahead and pull up the session that core members will see. It's not a perfect one. It's a work in progress, but we'll go from there. All right. Can y'all see this one?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So core members are going to come in, and we're going to have them jot down some questions about the pre-written curriculum. They would have had access to the curriculum, and part of the pre-work is for them to kind of just go through it a little bit. And then this way, whatever questions that they have, we can answer them throughout the session, and then see how that goes. So really quick little writing thinking activity. Then we'll jump into the session, spend a little bit of time talking about the linkages between what we're about to discuss with curriculum, and then specifically the academic growth piece, but also socio-political consciousness pieces of the broader student outcomes. And then just going to give them a little spiel about how, you're getting pre-made lesson plans. And the reason for that is we want you to focus on the execution. In the first couple of weeks, we want you to internalize these teacher moves straight through muscle memory. But then as Institute goes on, we will be asking you to take on more and more of the lesson planning process. And so that the scripted lesson plans will eventually go away. And then sort of just the objectives or where we're going, and pretty much big picture at the end of the session, they'll know all the different types of resources they have. They'll be able to explain the reasoning or purpose behind each resource. They're also going to be able to articulate how the IAs build on one another to get to the document-based question, the most critical one. And then we're also going to take a look at how we're going to grade the document-based questions. And then, of course, underlying all of this is linking what we're teaching kids with CRP.
Hey, Andre, can I ask a question? I'm not sure if
Yeah,
maybe
please.
the time or not, but when I was going through the module, I think what popped in I remember somebody saying it, maybe Abina at CC2. So there is this, the students are not there on Friday, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and so when I was going through the module, it kind of looked like it was the instructional activities were building on each other in a 5-day cycle. How does that translate if the students are only there 4 days? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, because we ran into that last year. It's going to depend on the actual schedule of the school. At our school with extra time, we were able to double up, and core members did the DBQ on Thursday. They just kind of mushed a few, Monday through Wednesday, they mushed them together a little bit better. And then our core members at the other school site, we actually did the DBQ on Monday. So all of their learning was pushed back, and their students did not go through the full curriculum.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Wouldn't that push them back? Okay.
Yeah. And we also took it by a case-by-case basis. There were some lessons specifically that we cut just because, it's we want to get to certain things. There were also other strategic moves, right? Hey, this IA as written is 20 minutes, but to get through things, we're going to cut it to 12 minutes because we've actually seen by week 3, kids are actually doing this at a high level, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, it's definitely a potential hotspot for sure. Yeah. Okay, so we'll just get into the agenda. This session is super self-explanatory. So I'm gonna define these 2 jargony type words for people who don't know. And then here is where I'm gonna jump into a spiel about backwards planning. But first I'm gonna push it out to the audience hey, we're talking about curriculum. Why in the world am I starting with assessments first? So we'll get a gauge for what they know, if anything, about backwards planning. And then if not, me or one of you all, we can kind of talk about that. And then, so with this assessment piece, we will have an activity. As a group, we are going to read a student response, and we're going to grade it on a rubric as a group. And then after that activity, about 10 minutes, we'll do another 10 minutes where they partner up and read a second student response. and then they grade it on a rubric just so that we can all kind of see where everybody is. That activity is pretty interesting. Core members have very divergent views on where they think the student responses are. So that is an area where we definitely have to monitor, and we sort of try to push people to a consensus around where the student responses are. All right. So then after we take a look at those assessments, core members will have these debrief questions. So where do we see vision coming through the assessment? And then what specific activities do kids need to do before the assessment to do well on it? Which I think pushes them to think about backwards planning. We'll talk briefly about unit plans. We'll go through the 3 pieces of the unit plan. And then we'll ask them the question, where do we see CRP living in our unit plan? Then we'll do a quick spiel about the different instructional activities that they're going to be doing. And after that, it becomes a ton of work time. And so core members are actually going to have scavenger hunts. So in round 1, they're going to read the objectives, take a look at the IAs, and think about what students are doing and then share with each other. Round 2, they're going to essentially break into groups, have different people read different parts of the lesson plan, and then share out with one another. This is really just to get them in the practice of breaking down some of the lesson plans. Then we'll wrap it up, and that is essentially what core members will get in this. I think it's about an hour-long curriculum session. Yeah. What are y'all's thoughts, questions, concerns, more potential hot spots?
So question, just because I want to make sure that my understanding is correct. This is during your session, correct?
Yes. And so it is actually the session before this, we look at the core practices, and then there's a break, and then they come to this session. Okay. And it's like on Tuesday or Wednesday, maybe. I can't for the life of me remember.
Okay. And so I guess my question from that, just in general, so the TEF sessions you are leading, and we as CMAs are there to assist, help, piggyback, maybe give another perspective.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Perfect. There's also, we can be very strategic with what we do. Like if there's a specific area that y'all are like, this is me, y'all can run that area. If either of you are like, man, adult facilitation is my jam, and you want to take more of it, I'm very open. Like I love this job, but I've done it a lot. And so last summer, by the end of the summer, my CMAs really did a lot of the heavy lifting. But we can definitely go at your speed. If y'all prefer, especially in the beginning, to do more of the small group leading, that's totally fine as well. And what we typically do is the Sunday before, we'll meet really quickly to just go over that week's sessions and plan out what parts do y'all want to play a larger role in. And I can do either way. Like if y'all are like, actually, I do want to step back and really just monitor core members, that's fine with me, and I can do the facilitation. Or if y'all want to jump in, that's fine. So either one works with me.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah. And I think definitely as the summer progresses, in terms of the modeling lessons and sharing viewpoints, I definitely want y'all to play a big role in that, because I think in the past, core members will sort of develop the personality of their facilitator, but it's no, all of us are pretty good at what we do, and we probably have different styles. So for them to see that the way y'all do things is just as great.
Makes sense.
Do we have access to a rough outline of what their like what these sessions kind of look like, or can we just kind of I guess we can just use the weekly progress monitoring tool to kind of predict what the sessions are going to look like. But is there like a schedule that we can look at?
I can probably share the link with y'all so y'all have access to all the sessions. What we've also done in the past is every week we give CMAs sort of like a weekly snapshot of how the sessions connect and any big activities. So like before the week starts, y'all will know, hey, on Tuesday, part of the session requires a model. Who's doing the model? What's the topic? I'm good with both. I also just don't want to overwhelm y'all. So I'll give y'all access to those folders, but don't feel like you've got to like learn the session entirely. Trust me, you're going to have more than enough dealing with your individual core members. So once again, like I'll give y'all access to whatever y'all need. But I also don't want you to feel like you have to take on so much because y'all will be doing the bulk of classroom observations and that type of thing.
Gotcha. And our TEF sessions are us three, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. All right. Perfect.
Yep. Yep. Other questions, comments, concerns?
Not really. I think you asked about hotspots. I could just I don't know. And thinking about like what are potential things we could run into. I think, well, I guess my comment kind of depends on how big the potential, like how many core members could be in the session.
So I imagine the best way to think about it is each of you will probably have between 9 and 15 core members. And so that number, I'd be very surprised if we had more than 30 history. And so I think at those numbers in the session, it works out to like 10 per person because I'll be in the session too. So we can break them down. So in terms of size, we're at a very manageable number. So I would say we'll have between 20 and 30, which is good. And then this session and the core practice session, they're pretty self-explanatory. Core members are still very new. This is like day 2 or 3 for them. They're exhausted. And so I think they're definitely like going with us here. And so I don't see there's not too much pushback. Like they're just excited to look at the lesson plans at this point. So I would say that these sessions tend to be a little bit of a lower level lift.
Gotcha. Yeah. Thanks for answering. Because I was just going to say, like, I guess depending on the number that we have, we would, because there's only 3 of us, we would have to be aware and cognizant of like, I guess core members choosing not to participate or feeling like they are not comfortable enough to participate, or that it's not a safe space. But based on the numbers that you said, I think that that could potentially mitigate that very well.
No, yeah, for sure. And I think week 1, that's really not an issue too much. But it is something that I think we have to guard against as the summer progresses. And then also just making sure that, especially in these first couple of sessions, it is worth all of us spending the time to have those fun, cool activities to like build rapport and things of that nature. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man, I think these sessions are pretty chill in terms of lift. Now the learning cycles are a little bit longer, and we have to monitor those. But these early sessions, like the very first session we give, core members are hanging on our every word because they're so brand new.
That makes sense.
Wyatt, do you have anything else that you were curious about? Questions, comments?
My question was answered, but they start teaching week 2, right?
Yes, they start teaching week 2. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
No, I mean, I'm excited I'm willing to facilitate or, whatever's necessary. So I'm excited.
Awesome. Okay, well, on that vein, I don't want to hold y'all up too much longer. If either of you want to stay on just for a few minutes, you've got other questions, that's totally fine. Y'all got my phone number, email address. CMAs do a lot. And so my thing is, I don't want y'all to feel like in my sessions you have to do so much. And so just reach out, whatever y'all need, I got you. I know the spring can be very overwhelming because y'all have got other jobs. My big thing for the spring, don't stress it too much. I promise we will have so much to do when the summer starts, and a lot of things will change and shift. So even as you're building sessions or having conversations, like don't put every single thing into it, knowing that there could be a lot of changes. And I think if you do that, you won't be so burned out because in the past I've seen people like kill themselves during the spring, and then by like week 2 they're not worth anything to anybody. I'd rather have you like behind the 8 ball now, but then week 1 and week 2 hits and you're ready to go, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
Well, on that vein, thank y'all both so much for joining, and we will chat again at Ignite.
Oh yeah, we do have that before the next call, huh?
I know. I'm kind of disappointed. It's here in Houston, so like I don't get to travel, but it's all good.
I felt like we just came back, and then already I'm already behind on pre-work.
Yeah, legit.
You're not alone.
Legit. No, as you should be. But you know what? Yeah, pre-work can be tricky for sure.
One last question: the pre-work for this session, which I did do. It says send it to your manager. Do I send it to you or to Tan or to both?
Yeah, just send it to both of us. Just send it to both of us. I would also add, I've known Tan for years now. Y'all are in excellent hands. He actually teaches some of my kids at the high school level. I'm so glad that he's a school director. He's very hands off, but he's there if you need him. And he and I have a really good relationship. So I think sometimes it can be tricky because you sort of have these like 2 managers ish, but know that Tan and I are on the same page. But yeah, so you can email it to him, just CC me. That's totally fine.
Okay.
Gotcha.
All right. And then Jasmine, I'll keep finding out more about the situation, but we'll figure that out. Everything's fluid because core member placements and stuff do change as regions tell us what they need.
Gotcha. All right.
All right. Well, y'all have a great evening.
All right. You too.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Take care.